Hey everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to make my family's favorite recipe for chocolate chip cookies. And you can make these cookies regular or you can make them gluten-free, whichever is your preference. I've made it both ways several times. But this is the chocolate chip cookie recipe that I keep coming back to because it is so good. Alright, so let's run down through the ingredients for these chocolate chip cookies really quick. We've got 1 cup of unsalted butter. I've used salted too, so whatever you have on hand will work just fine. I just prefer to use unsalted. Now when it comes to the butter, and mine is kind of melted because I softened it in the microwave. You do want it to be softened, but you want to use butter, not margarine. Margarine will create a whole different type of chocolate chip cookie. It'll change the texture and everything. So make sure that you're using butter. Whether you use salted butter or unsalted butter, it doesn't matter. Either one. But butter, not margarine. And then we have 3/4 cup of light brown sugar. Let's talk about the brown sugar just a little bit. I prefer to use light brown sugar because it gives you more of a raised cookie with a chewy center and kind of a crispy edge. If you use a dark brown sugar, it's going to give you a flatter cookie with a crispier, somewhat chewier texture, but it's going to be more on the crispy side. So something to keep in mind when you're picking out your brown sugar. And then we have 3/4 cup of just plain granulated, or I like to use pure cane sugar. And then we've got 2 large eggs, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. I've got 2 1/4 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour. Now I get a question a lot of the time, is bleached flour fine? Yes, that's fine. I just prefer unbleached if I'm using all-purpose. And I've also made this recipe with gluten-free flour, so with a cup for cup gluten-free flour. So either kind will work just fine. And this does make a really good gluten-free chocolate chip cookie, so just so you know. And then we have 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and we have a heaping teaspoon of salt, which if you're using salted butter, you probably don't need to make it heaping, just use a level teaspoon of salt. And then we've got our chocolate chips, and we'll have about 12 ounces of chocolate chips. We do not skimp when it comes to the chocolate chips. So, let's get started mixing up these cookies. We're going to start by adding a cup of unsalted butter. Again, you can use salted if you want. Then we're going to add 3/4 cup of light brown sugar and 3/4 cup of regular sugar or pure cane sugar. Then we're just going to cream that together. And by cream, I mean we're going to mix it together really good. Then we're going to add in 2 large eggs, and we're going to go ahead and add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and then we'll mix that up. Now, in the instructions for the recipe, I suggest sifting the flour and the baking soda and the salt together. And you can do that if you have a sifter, or you can just stir it together with a fork. And so right now we're going to add 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of salt, a heaping teaspoon of salt, if you're using unsalted butter. If you're using salted butter, then probably just a level teaspoon. And then we'll mix that up really good. At some point you'll want to stop the mixer and scrape the sides of your bowl just to get all the extra flour and stuff off the sides so that you can really mix it in good. Okay, and finally you want to add in 12 ounces of chocolate chips. I prefer to use semi-sweet chocolate chips, but I know a lot of people like milk chocolate chips or dark. So whichever is your preference, but I definitely recommend semi-sweet. And then we're going to mix those in really well. At this point, I like to chill my cookie dough for at least a couple of hours. I feel like it gives a chewier cookie when I do that. It's not necessary, you don't have to do that. The cookies will still be just as delicious. But if you want a chewier cookie, I really feel like chilling the dough helps with that. So something to keep in mind. When you go to scoop your cookie dough, you can use a spoon or you can use a handy scooper like this. I didn't like to use one of these before I met my husband, and he influenced me or encouraged me to use one because it gives you a rounder cookie and it also makes your cookie dough spread farther. So you get more cookies out of it if you use a cookie scoop. So instead of a spoon and your finger, use a cookie scoop. It works a lot better. Once you have your cookie scoops on your cookie sheet, then they're ready to go in the oven, and you want to bake them at 375 for about 10 to 12 minutes or until they're slightly crispy around the edges and done in the middle. And you can kind of tell that they're done by pressing your finger down on the center of the cookie, and if it springs back up, that means they're done. Also, you can tell they're done because they'll be lightly golden.